how can people beat that subconscious programming, that victim mentality when it comes to their success?
It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of studying. It takes a lot of reading. It takes a lot of unlearning. It takes a lot of self-love, having really hard conversations with yourself, and then physical environmental things as well. You have to put yourself in a different environment. You have to put yourself around different people. It takes a lot of work. Studying, reading books, training yourself to be the person you want to be.
Welcome, friends, to a new episode of Blessings. Today, I am thrilled to have with me Dr. Sheena Howard. Sheena is an award-winning author, a filmmaker, a professor, and a scholar. She was the first Black woman to win an Eisner Award for her book, Black Comics, Politics of Race and Representation. She has a phenomenal TED Talk all about mindset, and she is big on identity and helping people to realize the power of taking 100% responsibility for your life, a philosophy which has made her wildly successful as a writer and sought-after speaker. She is a champion for others and has written and spoken on topics like Black queer identity, Down syndrome, the educational system, diversity and representation, and other prominent causes. She has ridden the roller coaster of life. She takes no shit. She's an excellent driver. Ask me how I know. And she's the mom of an adorable little boy who is an author in his own right, thanks to her. Welcome, Sheena, to the show.
Thank you. That was the best intro I've ever gotten.
You may have a copy. So we're going to dig into your story, but I'd like to cut through the small talk and start off with a big question before we go back to the beginning of your life and really get that brain churning. So I want to ask you this. What do you wish that you did not care so much about?
Like through the journey or just right now in this moment?
Right now in this moment.
What do I wish I didn't care so much about? Historically, I wish I didn't care so much about what other people are thinking. Because one, it doesn't really help to try to figure out what other people are thinking. And two, usually we're wrong about what other people are thinking, but we spend so much time thinking about what other people are thinking about what we're doing. So I've overcome that, but it's very recent. So I would just say just worrying about other people and what they're thinking about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Even when you think you're not doing that, you're probably doing it.
Yes, for sure.
I love it. All right. So where were you born?
Philadelphia, PA.
Philadelphia Freedom. Yes. And I know we have that connection because I did live in Philadelphia for a lot of my early years and taught there as well. So I love that we have that connection. When you look back at your life, what's the very first thing that you can remember, your earliest memory?
My earliest memory, probably like my dad cooking crabs, because he used to cook crabs a lot. And one time he let the crab walk around the floor in the kitchen. And that was fascinating to me.
And then you cooked it and ate it?
It was very good. Yes. A big seafood lover.
Wow, that's an interesting memory. How old do you think you were?
4 or 5.
I love that.
5. Yeah.
Do you have any sense of what you think that means?
No, I just think that I never saw a crab in the kitchen crawling. And it was just like a new experience.
Yeah.
And it made me happy because I like when my dad would cook crabs and like he would walk around the house with his shirt off. And so I would want to walk around the house with my shirt off. And I was adamant about this. And my mom would be like, Sheena, you can't, because I'm a girl. So she's like, you can't walk around with your shirt off. And I'm like, no, I want my shirt off like my dad. And so oh man, I was very stubborn. Yeah, that's an interesting memory.
That's a great story. That's going to come back up for you probably after this conversation. I want to hear your reflections later on that. That's cool. I love it. All right. So tell me about your family. It was you, your mom and dad.
And my brother.
Okay.
And then my dad left when I was like 7. And so then it was just me, my mom, and my brother. And then when my brother went to college, it was just me and my mom. So my whole 4 years, because my brother's 4 years older than me. So my whole 4 years of high school, I was like an only child almost because my brother was away at college.
Uh-huh.
But me and my mom spent a lot of time together even before that. Like she was my basketball coach in high school. And so we were always really close.
What did your mom do?
My mom worked in the bank for a while, and then she worked in New Jersey and for the state in the schools development authority
Mm-hmm.
type
Interesting.
position in the
Okay.
real estate division. Yeah.
Did you stay in touch with your dad after he left?
Not too much. He just left and left. So my mom raised us.
Yeah.
But not much changed besides him not being in the house because my mom kept us in the house. We still went to the same school. So she was like adamant about, I don't want to disrupt the kids' life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was a really good thing for her to make sure that our lives weren't disrupted where we had to move to an apartment, right? And then change schools, all that. So it was, yes. For a while at the beginning, I thought it was going to be amazing because like I'm 7. So I was like, oh, I get to have 2 Christmases and 2 Thanksgivings and 2 sets of presents. Or no, because my dad wasn't around like that. So yeah, but now he comes over every week and my son knows him. And
so you're reconnected.
oh yeah. Yeah. He was always there. I never really knew where he lived. It wasn't like I could go to his house growing up and he wasn't around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So what kind of student were you when you were young?
Oh, great. It was great stuff.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
School was very easy. School was just very easy.
You went to public school?
I went to a Catholic school. I went to Catholic school all my life. I even went to a Catholic college, though I am not Catholic. But in Philadelphia, the school system is so bad. My mom did the best she could to not have us in public school. I was in public school for a few months in kindergarten, and it was so bad. My mom pulled me out, and then I just went to Catholic school for my entire education. Smart move. Glad she was able to financially figure it out. But I always liked school because I always wanted to learn and I always wanted to be the best. So I was always like this person. I just always got A's.
That is so great. What else did you do besides the academics in school? I know you said basketball.
Into sports. So I played soccer from as early as I can remember, super competitive. Yeah, I could have went to college for a soccer scholarship or a basketball scholarship or either one of those. I ended up going to college for on a basketball scholarship, but very highly competitive.
Were there any role models for you besides your mom when you were young?
Role models. Really, I have to say it was just my mom because I really didn't look up to anybody else. I live in my mind a lot and if you're in front of me, I know you are there. But if it's like out of sight, out of mind type thing, I'm still that same way, which is why it's very hard for me to really be a hands-on type of friend because I'm just in my own world most of the time. And I am okay with that, but I can see how that might not be okay for friendships. But I can't say I looked up to anybody. It was just my mom was my role model and example.
She was. Yeah.
And still, I don't really look up to anybody.
Okay. That's really interesting. Any teachers or anyone who had an influence on you?
Yeah, there are people that helped me along the way that definitely put ideas into my head that helped me get to the next level. I remember when I did my master's degree and I had a teacher, his name was Dr. Favell. I remember his name. And I wrote a paper. The paper was on like the myth. I think it was something called like the myth of slavery. And it was basically talking about how bad it would be for us to forget our history because then slavery could become a myth and then that would be terrible for the future, right? It was a whole big intellectual type theoretical paper. And I remember he gave me my paper back and he was like, you know what? You should go to Howard University. And I had never thought, had not thought anything about going to Howard University. I don't even think I thought about getting a PhD at that point. But he planted that seed in my head and he was like, yeah, I know. I think at the time he knew like the president at Howard University. And he was like, yeah, I'll connect you. I don't know whatever happened with that connection. But anyway, he put Howard University on the map for me. And I was like, and then that's how I ended up at Howard University, because I got fixated. I was like, this is where I'm supposed to go get a PhD, and I need to get a PhD. So I would say he was really influential. I have people that planted seeds in my head that supported me along the way. Lots of them, usually older people. I tend to make friends with people that are older than me. And yeah, they've been very helpful for sure. There's been lots of people like that.
Like people who you just connect with, they're like touchstones over the time.
Yes, that might plant certain seeds in my head.
Yeah.
Just give me a nudge of inspiration and encouragement.
Right. And when did you start writing things?
Oh, I've been writing since I was little. That's my preferred method of communication. I remember I used to write my mom letters if I wanted to ask her a question. Instead of just asking her, I would write letters. Writing is just my preferred way to communicate. And so I've been writing since I could write.
Do you remember the first story you ever wrote?
I didn't really start out writing stories. I started out writing poems. I used to journal a lot. I still have my old journals, because like I would journal and talk to myself, because journaling is talking to yourself.
Right.
But early on, I would write poems, and I actually used to perform poetry when I lived in DC, and I was very into the poetry scene. Actually, the first person that I wrote that I had a ghostwriting job with later on in life was someone that I met in the poetry scene, and we're still friends today, good friend of mine. And yeah, at the beginning, it was poetry and journaling.
When you look back at your high school years, was there anything that you did that was risky or crazy? What's the craziest thing you ever did as a teenager?
In high school, I wasn't like everybody else. So I really just wanted to do good in school and play sports. I played 5 sports in high school. And so I didn't have time to do some of the things other people were doing, because I was doing what I wanted to do. So I played basketball, cross country, track, volleyball, and soccer. I'm probably like I'm in the Sports Hall of Fame in high school. Wow. So I like kids would talk about, I know they were doing things because I hear them talk about it, but that just wasn't me. And I wasn't like have a group of friends type person. I had like 2 or 3 really good friends that I would hang out with, but we were like PG-13. Yeah. So after high school, I went to Iona College in New York. I did my undergraduate in business. So I have a marketing degree. Then I went so I did that in 4 years on a Division I basketball scholarship. It's Iona University now. Mm-hmm. Then I went to New York Institute of Technology. I did my master's there for 2 years. So I have a graphic design degree. And then I went to Howard. So I finished my PhD in 3 years. So I started at Howard when I was 23. And that first year I was teaching in college. I was a college teacher at 23. Crazy. And I graduated with my PhD at 26.
That's fantastic. And what's your PhD in?
It is in intercultural and rhetorical communication. And I did my dissertation on the Boondocks comic strip, which the Boondocks ended up being an animated television show that was really popular.
I think I remember it.
Yeah, you probably do. You probably remember the show. A lot of people don't realize that it actually started out as a comic strip that it was syndicated all over the country. And then it was a show that I'm not a fan of, but the comic strip I'm a big fan of.
Okay. I'm going to have to take a look back at that. That's so
my dissertation is on the comics, on a comic strip.
All right. I love that. And I know that was groundbreaking and controversial at the time, right?
Yeah, because nobody was really doing it. I think people were just confused. I don't think people thought it wasn't typical. And I was 23. So what the heck did I know? All I knew was I read this comic strip that I really liked. And I was in the class with 30-year-olds who seemed like dinosaurs to me at the time. And they all had it figured out. They were all working real jobs. They came into the program knowing what they wanted to study. And I had no idea. I'm like, I'm just here because I was called to be here. And they're like, hey, you got to write this dissertation and you need to know your topic right now. So I was a little freaked out and not knowing any better. I was like, oh, I like this comic strip. I'm going to do it on that. And
it ended up being something really special in the long run, right?
Yeah. Ended up being groundbreaking. It ended up being groundbreaking. And so now it's cool to study comics. They have majors where you can do comic studies and it's all accepted in academia. But so I did my dissertation from 2007 to 2010. It wasn't really a thing back then.
But comics are actually really beautiful metaphors for a lot of things. Like we use comics to express ourselves in a lot of ways. Humor is what we think about. I remember being little and reading the Sunday paper. It was humor. the Peanuts comics and the Calvin and Hobbes, those kinds of comics.
So true. Like the fact that you mentioned that. So that is a piece of my dissertation. There's a whole section on humor and how the Black community, but I think people in general use humor to deal with tough situations. Sometimes it's so bad, all you can do is laugh.
Yeah.
It's not actually funny, but you have to find humor in it to get through it. And so part of my dissertation actually talks about the history of you using humor in the Black community and how important that was.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, beautiful point that you made.
Yeah, even if you think about the one of the most popular comics, the Peanuts, right? Because Charlie Brown was always depressed. He was always depressed. And Lucy was the psychiatrist. She was the doctor is in. She had that little thing. And then it also dealt with the idea of like Linus had the security blanket.
Yes.
And that,
yes.
It's like all kinds of really interesting metaphors in that comic.
Yep.
And the use of humor, even political cartoons, even today, we use political cartoons to help us deal with heavy subject matter.
Exactly what you just said is why I think my dissertation did so well, because I showed that these comics are so much more than just images that appear in the newspaper every week. There's so many layers to these comics, and particularly the ones in the newspapers, like where it all started in terms of like comics. There's so much satire and there's meaning on top of meaning. And some people can read the same comic and be laughing at two different things because they have a different cultural background. It's just so much to study. And you can use comics to talk about things that you might not be able to necessarily talk about in the same way in some other medium. I think you can get away with a little bit more in comics because it's just a different medium.
Yeah,
you can teach kids. A kid would rather read a graphic novel about a historical figure for the most part, as opposed to just reading a book that doesn't have any images. A kid. And so there's a lot of literacy stuff around graphic novels and teaching kids history in a fun medium like that, where they can see images. And I never forget DMC from Run DMC when I started writing for him, because he's a big fan of comics. And he said, in school, the teachers could teach him about science and the planets, but comic books could take him there. Comic books, you literally can see the different planets and the colors, like take you there. Man, I that always stuck with me that he said that.
That's very profound. That's very profound, because we know when we read, in fact, I'm doing this now because I have a book club. And what I'm doing in the book club is helping people to engage with books by being active, by writing their notes, by underlining, by highlighting. Because when we read, typically books don't have illustrations anymore when you're a grown up, right? So when you're a child, imagine you're just emerging as a reader and you're just seeing all of these words without any associated images. And so for some kids, especially visual learners, that could be really challenging. And then we label them. We begin to label the kids as struggling in some way, when really they just need a different approach.
Exactly. Some kids, if you talk to some kids, this is in the academic literature, like they literally learned how to read through comics because they could see the pictures and it helped the story to be more engaging for them.
Yeah. My first books were comics as well. My first books, you used to be able to get I keep bringing up Peanuts. I don't know why that has such an impact on me, but it did. I loved them. And it was the 70s when I was growing up and they were all over the place. Snoopy was all over the place. And so I read those books every night before I was going to bed. In fact, I wrote a book report on Charles Schulz, who wrote the Peanuts cartoons. And I remember I called into the radio station. The question was, where does Charles Schulz live? Where is he from? And I knew the answer because I did a report. And I remember I called the radio station because that's what you did in those days. I called in and I was like, and they're like, hello, do you have the answer? And I'm like, yeah. And I was so shy. I whispered, I was like, Sebastopol. It was Sebastopol, California. And I'm whispering it, Sebastopol. And they're going, what? Speak up. And I actually won. I won movie tickets. I was probably about 10 years old.
Oh, but, that's so cool.
I know, isn't that funny? Yeah. But yeah, I love the idea that comics are so special because they are metaphors. So I know you have one that is published and pretty contemporary. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a few stories that I wrote for DC Comics. I wrote a Wakanda story for Marvel Comics, I think this year or last year, called Wakanda Forever #1. And then I wrote a comic back. My first comic book writing job was actually on a book called Superb, which actually features a superhero with Down syndrome. And so this was a very special project to me because my work is all about serving underestimated populations. I started saying underestimated populations because that is just so much better than underserved or whatever other term. And just to be able to write a superhero that we don't typically see has definitely been the most rewarding things in my career.
Yeah, that's beautiful because we want people to see themselves represented in print, especially
Exactly.
people in those, I love that term, underestimated populations. I'm going to use that.
Yes,
That's really
yes, it's very,
beautiful.
yes, I like it.
Let's just go back into your life just a little bit. I know you're a mom. So let's talk a little bit about your life and how you became a mom and some of the things that have gone on in your life that people might be able to relate to.
How I became a mom, you said?
When did you become a mom?
Yeah, so I think I was 33 when I got pregnant. I think I had my son at 34. And it's interesting because I never really consciously told myself I wanted kids. I was always just like, if it happens, but it would never just happen because I was like with a woman. So if it happens, you got to do something.
You have to make it happen.
So that was, I guess, a cop out. But in my life, I get visions. I don't know if other people get these. I have no idea if it's normal, but I get these little flashes of things. And so like for a really long time, I would get visions of a little boy. I knew what these visions of this little boy were, but I never really consciously was like, oh, you're probably supposed to have a kid. Like these visions are like, because who else would the little boy be? This is weird. So like, I guess some of our visions are obviously socially constructed because this little boy would be wearing little Jordans. But I think that was just representative of a little boy that like you're going to be spoiling probably. Anyway, I would have these visions of this little boy for years. Like I would just see him. So when I decided to have a baby, I used a sperm donor and did it in a very unconventional way. But I got pregnant like the first time. And I like, it's so crazy because I knew that I was going to get pregnant because I knew I was supposed to have this baby and I knew it was going to be a boy because I had these visions of this boy. And yeah, the first time I tried that night, like I got a pain in my stomach and I was like, oh, it worked. I'm glad. Like I had a real bad pain in my stomach the first night that I tried. And yeah, then my son was born 9 months later and he's amazing.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And so were you in a relationship at the time?
Yes, I was in a relationship, a very toxic one, a very abusive one. And I would have, man, I guess the universe needed to do something extreme to get me to have this baby because it was my abusive partner that convinced me to even have this baby.
Yeah. I want to ask if you're comfortable talking a little bit about the relationship because I think it would help people who might be in an
Sure,
abusive
yeah.
relationship. Okay. So yeah, so what was going
I was just when you are in a bad place, I think sometimes when you're successful like I was. So I had a house, I had a PhD, I was 26 years old, I was already a professor. Like I accomplished all of these great amazing things. I had an internationally known book, like all of these things. And I thought I was happy, but I did not know I was not. Like I thought, because sometimes you can list out all of the amazing things you do on paper and be like, oh, it's like, you should be okay. You did everything you're supposed to do. So I didn't really realize that I was in such a sad place. And I wouldn't call it depressed, but it was definitely a sad place that I didn't recognize that I was in. And part of my sadness was when I moved back to Philadelphia. I had to move back to Philadelphia to take the job at Rider University. Now, this is a dream job. Everybody that has a PhD wants a tenure track position. But I didn't want to come back to Philly because I felt like a failure. Because I'm like, the whole reason why I said I would never come back to Philly. Philly was like not a good place in my mind. And just coming back made me feel like I didn't make it. I feel like I went all around the world just to end back in Philadelphia. That was part of it. the other part is I think it's just, I just wasn't who I wanted to be, but I didn't recognize it then because I was doing fine.
Yeah.
And because of that, when you are in that state, you attract those types of people. This is just how it works. When you are in that state, that is what you are going to attract. So I was attracting career success and all that. So this is when I met my ex in that state of mind, not knowing that I was in a poor, unhealthy state of mind. But when I look back, like, that's why I attracted that person.
Yes.
I was just I wanted to date her so bad that I like chased her because she didn't even want to date me. If you're in a healthy state of mind, you don't choose people that don't want you. Right. Point blank, period. You choose people that choose you.
That's
you
right.
want to be with somebody that wants to be with you. But I was in an unhealthy state of mind. And so I pursued this relationship with a person that didn't want to be with me, that was toxic as heck. And I stayed with that person and put up with a lot, trying to make the relationship work. And because I tried to make the relationship work because I promised myself that I would make the relationship work. I made a commitment to myself, and I didn't want to break a commitment to myself because I didn't want to feel like I failed at the relationship because I promised myself that I would make it work. And so you can see how it just
never works.
A good place.
It always ends badly.
Yes. And so I had to go through that. Unfortunately, to get to the other side and be the person I am today, who everybody loves because I got to a place that I needed to be.
Yeah, because you're a very confident person. You're very confident. You have it all together. At least it seems that way from the outside.
Yeah. And it's interesting because before, when I was in that toxic place, I was confident too on the outside. But the difference now is that I'm confident and I'm actually confident.
What did it take for you to realize that situation was bad enough that you had to leave it?
I didn't love myself enough to leave. So my son I always tell my son, he doesn't understand when I say this, but I tell him he's my hero because he's the reason why I left. Because I might still be, I'd like to think that I would have left by now, but I didn't love myself enough to leave. Yeah. But when I had him, I was like, there's no way I'm raising this kid in this house with this person.
What kind of things were going on that people might be able to relate to?
Alcoholic, physical abuse, constant, terrible verbal abuse, both privately and publicly, isolating me from my family and friends, making it difficult for me to go to family functions because she would start an argument in the morning right before we were supposed to go to the family function, just so that she could ruin me not going to the family function. Yeah, all that type of stuff. It was terrible.
But you got out.
Yeah, I got out.
And I know you've talked about it, that it cost you a lot of money and cost you a lot of time. But once you got out, where were you then? What happened?
Yeah, I left on my birthday.
Oh my gosh.
On my birthday that year. I left and never came back. And then the abuse was terrible, but the aftermath of untangling all of that was terrible. That was the toughest time was leaving. I think they say the most dangerous time for an abuse victim is when you leave. Mm-hmm. And I think when you hear that saying, you think about when you actually physically leave in the moment, but the when you leave could last for 5 years. It's dangerous for the next years, right? Because the toxic person is outraged and enraged. How dare you leave me? And so they start doing all types of crazy things. Toxic people. Yeah. So stalking, showing up at the house drunk. I got my tires slashed. Now that I don't know if it was my ex, but I'm pretty sure it was. Smear campaigns, getting people to follow you. All time. I experienced all of that. Leaving.
Yeah.
For years.
Wow. And that's why people are afraid to leave. But what's your advice about that?
So I was extremely scared. I couldn't sleep at night. I thought that she was going to get me and show up in the house and get me, murder me, all that. I couldn't sleep. I thought she was going to get me or hire somebody to kill me. I guess they would call that PTSD. I don't have PTSD, but I guess it's like a symptom of it. That kind of sounds like that to me. Very fearful place. She would sit outside my house and not leave, and the cops would take hours to come. This is even after I had an order of protection. She's not even supposed to be in front of my house. Cops would show up and laugh at me because they're cops. Yeah. This is a big joke to them.
Do you think they were laughing because you were in a relationship with another woman? It was like a female that you have the restraining order against?
I think there was some of that. There was some of that. But when I hear other people's stories about how they just don't take women seriously, period, when they experience domestic abuse, I think it was some of that because it was a same-sex relationship. Yeah. But I think the system treats victims terrible.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's easier to blame the victim, or just I don't know what the psychology behind it is.
Right.
After I left, I was just in a very fearful place for a very long time, constant court cases, trying to untangle the divorce and like all types of stuff. Her not being related to my child, but still wanting visitation, all that kind of stuff. Ugh. Yeah, it was like a whole 5-year ordeal. And then when you're trying to divorce a toxic person that has money, they're not just going to sign divorce papers. No, this is all about control and using the system to hurt you even more. So that's what I experienced. But the way I got over that is that I got tired of being scared. I just got tired. Like, I just got tired of the fear because there's nowhere to go from fear. There's nowhere to go. Fear is a box. You can't do anything with fear. So there was nowhere for me to go but up. It's either up or stay in the box of fear, which I know some people probably do. But I couldn't. I just had to do the things that I could do to the extent that I could do them. Court orders, hiring a security guard, orders of protection. I have multiple orders of protection. And then move on.
Is it over?
I just said, I'm going to do everything I can do, and then I'm not going to be scared anymore.
And is it over? Did you get past all of that?
It's over in my mind, but she's still around. My son still has to do visitation with her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But she has
harass you as much.
She can't because I don't respond.
Yeah.
And I have a security guard.
Wow.
Anytime I have to do a custody exchange, my security guard is there with me.
Wow. I'm sorry you have to live that way.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
I did everything that I could do, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I did everything that I could do.
You did. And I love your whole attitude about it, because that's really your big message, is the whole idea of you can be the victim of something that happens in your life. And that's true. You can be physically a victim, but you don't have to accept victimhood as your identity.
Yeah, I couldn't. Otherwise, I would be stuck. I needed perspective shifts and to just look at things from a different perspective. Yeah, my son has to go visit with her like 2 to 3 times a week. And before, I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to do anything. I'm not going to be able to travel for speaking engagements. I'm not going to be able to go do all the amazing things I want. Because my ex is so toxic, she convinced the court to make it so I have to show up for custody exchanges instead of me sending someone to drop my son off, which would be the best because I don't want to see you, right? Because the system is a part of the problem, by the way. And so for me, I was like, man, how am I ever going to be able to do anything, to go anywhere, to go on vacation? But I had to look at it from a different angle. She only has him these days a week. That means I have 7 other days or whatever they are to do everything else I need to do. Mm-hmm. And I need to look at this from a different perspective. Otherwise, I'm just going to be stuck in a box of you can't do anything because you have this going on. And I don't want to not be successful just because I made a mistake and I'm paying for it. I don't want to not be successful just because of this.
Exactly. And that's really the mindset that you have to have if you want to be successful. So people who are just trapped in their programming are not going to be able to break out of that box. And I think that has a lot to do with our mindset, even around money and the poverty mindset too. So it translates into other areas of your life. And I know we were just attending an event together where you were a speaker, and the event was centered around breaking the poverty mindset. So how can people beat that subconscious programming, that victim mentality, when it comes to their success?
It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of studying. It takes a lot of reading. It takes a lot of unlearning. It takes a lot of self-love, having really hard conversations with yourself, and then physical, environmental things as well. You have to put yourself in a different environment. You have to put yourself around different people. It takes a lot of work. Studying, reading books, training yourself to be the person you want to be.
Because everybody says they want to be rich.
Yeah.
but they're not always doing the things that it takes to get rich. They're busy complaining about why they're not rich or who's preventing them from being rich.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you're unapologetic about wanting a good life.
Yes.
And wanting to make money.
People make women feel bad about this.
I know.
They've tried to make me feel bad about it, but you're not living.
How did you get out of it? Like, how do you become unapologetic about wanting money?
I studied. I studied a lot of self-help books. Self-help has helped me a lot. Think and Grow Rich, The Principles of Success, Jack Canfield. I've paid for his programs. I've paid for business coaches. Having a kid, I think, helped because I strongly believe that you can only teach your kid to make the amount of money that you have made. And I can teach my kid how to make 6 figures easy. I know the formula for that. I can't teach him how to make $1 million because I haven't. By the time he gets 18, I will be a millionaire, and then I can teach him that. But I don't think you can teach your kid how to exceed a financial goal that you haven't exceeded yourself because you don't know how.
So if you're the child of someone who hasn't achieved that, you have to work extra hard.
Yeah. Otherwise, they're going to have to figure it out on their own and then teach their kids or even teach the parent.
But once you can teach your kid, you're breaking the cycle. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do in 1 generation what it would literally take somebody like me to do in 2.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it. It's not like, will it happen? I'm definitely going to be a millionaire.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. You're well on the way. And so am I.
Yes, for sure.
I love it. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about race, because a lot of your work is about race.
Yes.
You have a documentary called Remixing Colorblind, which is about the ways the educational system shapes our perspective of race. And I love that idea because I started my career in the school district of Philadelphia. And I was hired because they needed a white teacher in a Black school.
That's funny. I love
so I know it is funny. But I've seen it in Philadelphia. I understand why your mom didn't want you to go to the school district of Philadelphia. And God, I hope it's better now, but I don't think it is. So what's wrong with us? And like, where are we getting it wrong? And how can we get it right?
Us as educators or just people like?
I think the whole the educational system, maybe in particular, to start.
Yes.
Because really, if we could get something right about teaching people something different there, then we could affect the society, right?
Yes.
Because everybody has to go to school.
There's a lot of things. Your neighborhood makes more money, you get a better school.
It's true.
You grow up, you are born into the wrong zip code, probably not going to have a good school. And I think that capitalism is set up in a way where everybody below you scares you. So upper class people don't want to be middle class people, don't want to be lower middle class people. Lower middle class people don't want to be working class people, and working class people do not want to be poor. I think we could be further along as a human race if everybody was properly educated, because literally our science and technology has been relegated to just a pool of white men and some white women. That's literally where we're getting cures for all types of diseases and stuff. Now, imagine if everybody was educated, how much faster we could solve diseases and solve problems, and because everybody is educated enough to participate. But I think capitalism is just at the expense of humans.
I have 2 questions that came to mind. I believe in free market capitalism when it's working correctly. I don't think it's working correctly in our country, but I believe because we don't have true capitalism. We don't have true free market capitalism. But I think if it was working correctly, if we actually had it, it would allow everyone the opportunity to make money. But it's right now, the system we have makes it really difficult. So I totally understand that. I totally agree. It's interesting what you said, because do you think that race and the difficulties that we have around that issue are tied directly to money?
Yeah, race and economics are inextricably linked.
Yeah. That's fascinating, because a lot of people don't really look at it that way.
Black people don't have as much wealth and money as white people. There's reasons for that. But I've read some studies that say Black people can never catch up to the amount of wealth that white people have accumulated. We can never catch up.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but I've seen that.
That's interesting. I don't know.
It makes sense, but
I guess as a group, like if you look at people, I tend to look at people as individuals, but I understand the philosophy of looking at people as a group too. But if you think about all of the people of color who are trapped in really bad economic situations, like in the inner cities and in the poor countryside in different parts of the country, it's so true. Getting out of that is really hard. I worked in that type of a neighborhood in elementary school system and saw how kids cannot, like they literally can't, they have no idea that there's even a world outside of their 2-block radius where they live and have to walk to school. And the same thing
for the kids.
Same thing
for
with
the kids. There's no fault of their own. There's no fault of their own that they were born into whatever situation they were born into. And I do think when you're born into certain circumstances that are really tough in really tough neighborhoods where you don't get a chance as a kid to see something different, and, I think that you have to be able to imagine something that you don't see. And that is really a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is. This is a topic that makes me really sad. And I don't want people to be afraid to talk about it because we're afraid to talk about it. Nothing ever gets solved. And so I love the idea of just being able to talk about it and try and figure out solutions because it's a big problem. It's a very big problem. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, what's one little thing you think that we could do to help?
One thing we could do to help. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to raise a successful child and help my family.
Yeah.
Because that's more doable and feasible for me. Yeah. And it's not my responsibility to save the world and to try to fix racism. Sometimes I think as a Black person, I work in higher ed, it's predominantly white. And sometimes we do get in there thinking we're going to change the world. We're going to change this university. We're going to help all the Black kids that come to the university. And it's not realistic.
Yeah.
And I wasn't put on this earth to change my university and fix all of their diversity issues. I like to do things that are manageable for me that I know I can do. And I can raise a Black boy that is a good person, that knows how to make money, that's going to go out and do more positive things in the world for more people than I can even reach, so that he can have grandkids that can do more. That's my solution to fixing, to helping the world in my own small little space.
Yeah. Because if you help yourself and you help your children, you're helping the world. And exactly. I love that. I think that's a beautiful answer. And that's how I felt when I taught in Philadelphia, because I went in there thinking the same thing. I was going to change the world. Mm-hmm. And I realized very quickly that I was not going to change that situation, especially as a white woman walking into a Black school. I was not going to help as much as I wanted to. So I get that. But thank you for touching on that with me. What are, you think, that some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in your life?
Some of the biggest lessons. Importance of money. I didn't value money. I just always had money. Not that I was raised wealthy or anything. I never had to worry about money. My mom made sure we never had to worry about money. Yeah. And so I didn't really see it as important, but money is extremely important because it is a tool to live a better life. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn to value money in a different way. I do think it's important to learn how to make your own money.
Especially as a woman.
Yes, outside of an institution or an organization. I did not always think that. I don't think it's anything wrong with W-2 employees. And you could be a millionaire working for Amazon corporate or whatever. But I do think valuing money was a super important lesson. One of the other lessons is sometimes we walk around with trauma that we don't know we have. Mm-hmm. This one, I don't know how to solve this problem because I only realized that I had childhood things that I needed to fix after I was in a really desperate situation. I didn't know because it didn't come to the surface because it never presented a problem. It wasn't until it presented a problem that I realized, I probably got some issues that I need to work out. I would like to think that you don't have to go through suffering and a crisis to figure out the trauma that's holding you back. But I don't know. In my experience, I had to go through that. And I don't think therapy would have helped. I don't think preventative therapy, because I didn't know that it was a problem, right? Yeah. Therapy is only as good as what you tell the therapist. So they couldn't help me with a problem that I didn't know
Exactly.
didn't have.
Blind spots. We all have these blind spots.
Perfect. Blind spots. Yeah. So I just
Good
wish I would
ones.
have did things sooner, but the
Yeah.
journey is the journey,
That's
and
right. You can only figure it out when you figure it out. You can't know before,
yeah.
right?
I wish
I
there
love
was a
that.
way that I could have figured it out easier with less suffering. And that's why I post the content that I do,
Yes,
because I don't want people to experience some of the things I
exactly.
experience.
People can relate to your content. What about your biggest blessing or blessings in your life? What are you most grateful for?
Oh, I'm so grateful for how I was raised, the character, the foundation that my mom gave me is undefeated. And this is not to cast judgment on anybody. This is just me. This is important to my journey. I don't do drugs. I don't take pills. I don't smoke weed. I don't drink alcohol. None of these, what I see personally as crutches, they would be, because I would be doing those things because I'm not happy with some part of me or whatever. I don't use unhealthy things to deal with stress and hard problems. And I think that's really important. That is an important part of why I was able to go through such a bad time and not self-destruct and not harm myself. Of course, I was harming myself by being with a toxic person, but in terms of treating my body and making it worse and just making it worse, I really appreciate the character that my mom gave me.
Yeah, she must be phenomenal. Maybe I'll get to meet her one day.
Yes, mental, the resilience that I have, I think it came from my childhood.
Yeah.
Just the building blocks.
Yep. Yeah. That's the foundation. I love it. Thank you so much, Sheena, for being with me today and for being so open and talking about so many interesting things.
Yes. Got some good stuff out of me today, Mitzi.
I did. I'm sorry if I made you feel any kind of way.